my new record called Pawn Shop, or my latest record called Pawn Shop. And it's something that I like to do that goes between minor pentatonic scales. Now, most of us have probably played, or guitar players have played like a minor pentatonic scale, right? Your blues scale, right? And doing that kind of scale. Pretty simple scale, pretty basic. The biggest thing that I hear from people is that they get really bored just playing that scale when they have to solo and stuff with it, because it can get not very interesting, because that's where all the blues licks come from, you know? You know, guys go, I just keep playing the same lick over and over. So what I like to do is move the minor pentatonic scale to different spots and stay within the same key. Now, I don't want to get too weird with theory and stuff here, but there's a couple ways you can do it. And the first thing that's on that particular handout is doing a lick that goes, the whole first part of the lick is in C sharp minor pentatonic. And it's this total funk. In C sharp minor pentatonic. Then I go to F sharp minor pentatonic, which is also in the key, and do the lick. That particular scale. I'm adding a note in there that you guys can follow along that makes it a Dorian scale, which gets into the modal scales, which takes you out of pentatonic stuff and puts you in mode land. So all of that is going to be using your Dorian scale with the advantage of a chromatic note thrown in. How many of you guys know what a chromatic note is when we talk about chromatic scales? Basically, a chromatic scale is when you play every single note. Some people call those wrong notes, but if you're really clever, you just call it a chromatic note instead. So we're playing a chromatic note in there, right here. A lot of times you will add that to the pentatonic scale in different places. You will sometimes add it as the flat 5, which makes it what we call the official blues scale, right? But you can add it to a lot of different places. You can do a flat 2nd. You know, you can do a lot of different notes in there. You can add the major 7. It's always going to give you a little different flavor. So what you want to make sure you do is not get too stuck in your same pentatonic ruts and always thinking that you have to play pentatonic stuff the same way, because there's a lot of different notes that you can add in there. As I'm talking about, that's the first example on your page that you can actually use to, you know, to kind of play through and experiment with it. As I'm talking about that, it kind of brings me to the next example, but I'm not quite doing that example. What I'm going to do is show you different things you can do with a pentatonic scale. You can make it sound unlike the pentatonic scale by doing different patterns. Most people play their scale and all they do is they practice for hours and hours and hours going. The problem is then every time you do a solo, it sounds like you're doing the same thing. You know, you just kind of go up the scale and you go down the scale. So what you can do is you can mix those notes up and do them in different orders. Like do this kind of a lick. That's all playing the minor pentatonic scale, but it certainly doesn't sound like your normal blues. You know, you can do some different interesting things with it. Do the same thing with different shapes by skipping strings, by playing, then skipping a string. In other words, you're mixing it around. You're not playing the same exact scale up and down all the time, right? Now, when we come to the major scales, we do the same thing. That's the second example on the sheet. Anybody that's got one of those sheets there? Your second example is taking the major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, di, do, right? Like you had to sing in chorus. That's your basic major scale. Same thing. If all you do is play straight up and down, you just get this, you know, this scalular sounding thing, which is hard. That's one of the biggest challenges, is try to play scales but make them sound like they're not scales, right? Make them sound like music. One thing you can do with that is that second example is showing you how to do triads with your scale shape by starting on the second note and then playing the 1, 3, and 5 of your A minor, then going across. So you got arpeggiating it, meaning we're playing the notes one at a time, so it's a 3-note arpeggio. So we're playing all 3 notes of the chord, but one at a time. All of a sudden it starts sounding a lot more like music and a lot less like you're just playing up and down the scale, even though you're still playing a pattern. Because when it comes down to it, you're always playing a pattern of some kind, right? I mean, you were playing patterns, that's just the way we play guitar. Unless you're playing totally by ear and you know your instrument so well you can just play anywhere you want. That's hard to do. So we're playing some kind of pattern. So when we're doing a pattern, we just as well do a pattern that's interesting rather than the same old boring pattern. Like what I call non-musical exercises is stuff like this, going, you know, those kind of things that you have to do. Those are great for getting your fingers happening, but they're not really going to help your actual soloing because, you know, that's really hard to call that music, you know? So you're just doing a pattern, you're just doing a shape. So when you're doing a shape, what I've come to find, the more I play, the more I like playing shapes that are actually musical, right? That have some musical value. Does that make sense? So one thing we do is not only do the different, like the triad thing, but also do different interval patterns, right? Now everybody knows basically an interval is the space or the distance between 2 notes, right? So if I play this note and I play another note, that's some interval away. And when you sing harmonies, you're singing intervals of notes, different interval shapes. Your interval patterns can be anything. Say we're playing that same major scale, but if we play up in intervals of a third, right, we're playing the first note, and then we're playing a third from that. So in other words, we're skipping 1 note and playing the third. Then the second note, then a third from there. Same thing, we're playing thirds all the way across. You do that with all the interval shapes. You do fourths. From there, you go up 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Do the same thing. Fifths, you do 6, 7ths, and octaves. If you get to 6, I mean, that gives you some pretty interesting sound. That's when you start coming up with a lot more creative licks and doing things that are a lot more interesting instead of just doing, you know, the kind of the playing the same old scale all the time. Okay? Well, hold a pick.
Today. You all know this is Jeff Scheetz, who just did his guitar clinic here. Behind the drums is Ted Kirkpatrick of Tourniquet. On bass guitar we have Trip.
Okay, so are we ready? You good?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Tuning. Hey, you know anybody that's like got a video camera? ICD. That we've never played before. Just emailed or something, you know, and said, let's do this song. You know, I tried to get a hold of Ted for like a week, and Doug says, you got to get a hold of Ted, and he's, find out what you guys are doing. I kept calling, leaving messages. Finally he calls me back. It was good because it was like 2 days before I was going to go on this fishing trip up to Canada. He called me back and said, man, he said, I've been gone for a fishing trip up to Canada for the last week. So, we almost got together in Canada and played these tunes, which would have been pretty cool. But, so we did catch a lot of fish, except he caught the biggest fish, so we don't want to talk about that right now. I've got pedals strewn all over up here, so. If it sort of doesn't work, that's good. It's just up there for love. We're going to do some funky things. This, we're into the jamming area. We were talking a lot in the guitar clinic about the improv thing, and so we're going to do it and do some breaking down and let the wild man play some bass stuff and do some cool stuff. bass stuff that you've ever heard in your life. He's got those for sale right back there, so you should go. was the fastest I've ever played the Orange Blossom Special. Actually, that was the only time I've ever played it, so it was setting a standard for sort of the Orange Blossom Special. Woo!
About 15
Bushong, ladies and gentlemen, on guitar. Your neck is falling. Don't let it go anymore, man. Yeah, I know it's not in your contract, but come on now. Tony, are you out there, Tony? Tony, right here. Tony, you got 2 minutes. One more. He says he doesn't know the song. Oh! I'm thinking about Ted. And you got this killer drummer, and he's got to play while a bunch of guitar players go. Give him some, Ted.